Welcome to Global Perspectives, where today we delve into one of the most critical questions of our era. Should economic growth be prioritized over environmental protection? This is a dilemma that governments, corporations, and individuals grapple with daily, with profound implications for our planet and future generations. To dissect this complex issue, we are joined by two distinguished guests. Representing the imperative for economic advancement is Mr. Marcus Thorne, a seasoned economist and CEO of a multinational corporation. Championing the cause of environmental preservation is Ms. Lena Petrova, a prominent environmental scientist and director of a leading conservation NGO. Our debate will commence with opening statements from each speaker, followed by a period of rebuttal and cross-examination, and will conclude with closing remarks. We anticipate a robust and nuanced discussion, befitting the C1 level of discourse our audience appreciates, exploring the intricate balance between progress and preservation.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes. The assertion that we must choose between economic growth and environmental protection presents a false dichotomy, a zero-sum game that I believe is fundamentally flawed. Economic growth is not merely about accumulating wealth. It is the principal engine for human progress, the force that has historically lifted billions from abject poverty and continues to offer the promise of a better life. Consider the tangible benefits: enhanced healthcare systems, broader access to quality education, and the development of critical infrastructure. All are inextricably linked to robust economic expansion. Furthermore, it is precisely this growth that fuels the innovation necessary to address our environmental challenges. Technological advancements, from renewable energy sources to sophisticated pollution control mechanisms and resource-efficient manufacturing processes, are born from dynamic, growing economies. To deliberately stifle economic growth in the name of environmentalism, particularly in developing nations, is to condemn them to a cycle of deprivation, and to deny them the very resources needed to invest in environmental stewardship. Indeed, there's a compelling body of evidence, often encapsulated in the concept of the environmental Kuznets curve, suggesting that as nations prosper, they reach a tipping point where environmental degradation begins to decline, precisely because they acquire the means and the societal will to address it. Prioritizing environmental regulations so stringently that they cripple economic activity would be counterproductive, undermining our capacity to innovate and adapt. It is through sustained, intelligent economic growth that we generate the wealth to invest in a cleaner, more sustainable future, not by retreating from it. Thus, the question is not whether to grow, but how to grow, in a manner that is both prosperous and responsible. A stagnant global economy offers no solutions. It only exacerbates existing problems and diminishes our collective capacity to overcome them. We must foster an environment where enterprise can flourish, creating the capital and the intellectual property that will ultimately safeguard our planet.
Dr. Hayes, Mr. Thorne, thank you. While I acknowledge the societal benefits that economic development has brought, the narrative that unbridled economic growth is unequivocally benign and can seamlessly coexist with planetary health is, I contend, a dangerous illusion. The relentless pursuit of infinite economic expansion on a finite planet is inherently unsustainable and, frankly, self-destructive. We are already witnessing the profound consequences of prioritizing short-term economic gains over long-term ecological stability. The scientific consensus is undeniable. Climate change, driven by greenhouse gas emissions from industrial activities, is accelerating. Biodiversity loss is occurring at an alarming rate, threatening ecosystem resilience. Our forests, which are vital carbon sinks and havens for wildlife, are being decimated for agriculture and resource extraction. Our oceans are acidifying and choking on plastic. These are not abstract future threats. They are current crises, directly attributable to an economic model predicated on perpetual growth and consumption. The very ecosystem services that underpin our economies and, indeed, our survival, clean air, potable water, fertile soil, pollination, are systematically undervalued or treated as externalities in conventional economic calculus. This growth at all costs mentality disregards the fundamental truth that a healthy environment is the bedrock of a healthy economy and a thriving society. To suggest that technology, funded by this same growth, will miraculously solve all these problems is a gamble we cannot afford to take, especially given the irreversible nature of some ecological tipping points. We urgently need a paradigm shift towards sustainable development models, embracing concepts like the circular economy, investing in ecological restoration, and, for affluent nations, perhaps even considering degrowth in materially intensive sectors. True prosperity is not measured solely in GDP figures, but in the well-being of people and the health of the planet that sustains us all.
Thank you both for those compelling opening statements. We will now move into our rebuttal and cross-examination phase. Ms. Petrova, Mr. Thorne argues that economic growth is the engine for the technological innovation needed to solve environmental problems. How do you respond to the idea that growth, and the wealth it generates, is ultimately our best bet for funding and developing these solutions, perhaps even referencing the environmental Kuznets curve?
Mr. Thorne, your faith in technological salvation, while optimistic, seems to overlook the sheer scale and urgency of the crises we face. The environmental Kuznets curve, for instance, is a concept that has been heavily debated and is not universally applicable, particularly for global commons issues like climate change or biodiversity loss, where the impacts are not localized and easily reversible once a certain income threshold is met. We have seen decades of economic growth alongside escalating environmental degradation. Where is the evidence that the current model of growth, even with technological advancements, is capable of decoupling resource use and environmental impact at the pace required? Many so-called green technologies still rely on extensive resource extraction, and their life cycle impacts are not always benign. Furthermore, what about the time lag? Can we truly afford to wait for these technological silver bullets to emerge and be globally deployed while critical ecosystems collapse and climate feedback loops intensify? Is it not a profound ethical gamble to continue on a path that has demonstrably led to widespread environmental harm, effectively burdening future generations with a depleted planet and an unstable climate, all on the promise of future, unproven fixes? Are we not externalizing immense costs onto those future inhabitants, and indeed onto vulnerable populations today who are least responsible for the problem, but most affected by its consequences?
Ms. Petrova, I acknowledge the gravity of the environmental challenges you articulate, and I don't propose a Panglossian view that technology alone is a panacea arriving deus ex machina. However, to dismiss the transformative potential of human ingenuity, often spurred by market incentives and funded by economic prosperity, would be a disservice to the progress we've already made and the potential that lies ahead. Consider the advancements in renewable energy technology. Solar, wind, battery storage, their costs have plummeted, and deployment has surged, largely due to investment and innovation driven by economic forces. Yes, there are resource implications for these technologies, but this is precisely where further innovation in materials, science, and circular economy principles, again fostered by a dynamic economy, comes into play. Stringent environmental regulations, if imposed precipitously without regard for economic realities, can indeed stifle this very innovation and disproportionately harm developing economies, hindering their ability to invest in cleaner alternatives. It's not about waiting passively. It's about actively investing the proceeds of growth into research, development, and deployment of solutions, alongside robust adaptation strategies for the changes already underway. The ethical imperative, as I see it, also includes ensuring that we do not condemn vast swaths of the global population to poverty by prematurely halting the engine of economic development that offers them a pathway to improved living standards and greater resilience. Wealth generated by growth provides the capacity for these investments, a capacity that would be severely diminished in a scenario of enforced economic stagnation.
Mr. Thorne, Ms. Petrova has advocated for a shift towards different growth, possibly even degrowth in some sectors for developed nations, focusing on qualitative development. You've emphasized that curtailing growth could lead to unemployment and social unrest. How do you address the argument that the current model of growth is itself creating systemic risks that threaten long-term stability and prosperity, potentially leading to far greater disruption if unchecked? And how can environmental protection be funded globally, if not through the proceeds of robust economies, as you suggest?
Ms. Petrova, the concept of degrowth, particularly for advanced economies, while perhaps intellectually stimulating in certain academic circles, presents profound practical and ethical challenges. How do you propose to manage a deliberate contraction of economic activity without triggering widespread unemployment, a decline in essential public services funded by taxation, and significant social instability? Historically, periods of economic contraction are associated with increased hardship, not societal advancement or increased well-being. Furthermore, on a global scale, how would we fund the massive investments required for environmental protection, for the transition to greener energy systems, for conservation efforts, if not through the surplus generated by healthy, growing economies? Philanthropy and government aid, while important, are insufficient to meet the scale of the challenge. It is private sector investment, driven by economic opportunity and facilitated by growth, that mobilizes the trillions of dollars needed. Are you suggesting that developing nations, which are striving to achieve the living standards we in the developed world take for granted, should also curtail their growth aspirations? That seems both inequitable and politically unviable. While I agree that growth must become smarter and more sustainable, the idea of actively pursuing economic shrinkage as a policy goal appears to be a recipe for regression, not progress, potentially undermining the very social fabric needed to address complex challenges like environmental protection.
Mr. Thorne, allow me to clarify. The discourse around degrowth is nuanced and often misrepresented as a call for universal, indiscriminate shrinkage leading to hardship. For over-consuming, affluent nations, it suggests a planned, equitable downscaling of material and energy throughput in sectors that are ecologically damaging or socially less necessary, while simultaneously investing heavily in areas that enhance well-being and ecological health, such as renewable energy, public transportation, regenerative agriculture, education, and healthcare. This is about qualitative development, not simply quantitative contraction of everything. The narrative that this automatically equates to widespread unemployment ignores the immense job creation potential within green transitions. Investing in energy efficiency retrofits, developing sustainable infrastructure, restoring ecosystems. These are labor-intensive activities that can create millions of quality jobs. Regarding funding, the question is not a lack of money in the world, but its allocation and the priorities of our economic system. Shifting subsidies from fossil fuels to renewables. Implementing carbon pricing, where revenues are reinvested in green initiatives. And reforming financial systems to penalize ecological destruction and reward stewardship can unlock vast resources. The costs of inaction, the damage from extreme weather events, healthcare costs from pollution, loss of agricultural productivity, are already astronomical and projected to dwarf the investments needed for a proactive transition. It's a matter of paying now for a managed transition or paying exponentially more later for unmanaged collapse. For developing nations, the path is not necessarily degrowth, but leapfrogging the polluting, resource-intensive development models of the past and embracing sustainable pathways from the outset, supported by international finance and technology transfer, which, incidentally, robust global cooperation, rather than unfettered competition, could facilitate. This isn't about regression. It's about redefining progress beyond mere GDP accumulation to encompass genuine human and ecological flourishing.
In conclusion, Dr. Hayes, while the dialogue has been vigorous and the environmental concerns raised are undeniably significant, I must reiterate my conviction in the indispensable role of economic growth. It is the bedrock of human flourishing, the engine of innovation, and our most potent tool for solving the very challenges we've discussed today, including environmental ones. A future where we retreat from growth is a future of diminished possibilities, not enhanced sustainability. The path forward lies not in abandoning growth, but in guiding it intelligently, fostering technological advancements, and ensuring that market forces are harnessed to promote both economic prosperity and environmental stewardship. This requires a balanced approach, where responsible investment and innovation allow us to see economic development and environmental care not as mutually exclusive, but as compatible and mutually reinforcing objectives. I remain optimistic that a prosperous, technologically advanced global society can and will successfully manage environmental challenges, not by shrinking our ambitions, but by expanding our capacity to innovate and adapt, fueled by continued, sustainable economic development.
Thank you. My closing argument is a simple yet urgent one. The health of our planet is not an optional extra, nor is it a secondary concern to be addressed once economic targets are met. It is the fundamental prerequisite for all human activity, including economic activity. To prioritize endless, undifferentiated growth over the integrity of the ecosystems that sustain us is a profoundly irrational and perilous gamble. We require an urgent paradigm shift, moving away from the dogma of short-term economic gains and embracing a vision of long-term ecological sustainability and intergenerational justice. This necessitates systemic changes in our policies, our economic models, and, crucially, our societal values, recognizing that true prosperity is interwoven with the well-being of the natural world. Let us choose a future where progress is measured not just by what we accumulate, but by what we preserve and restore. A future where human ingenuity serves not to dominate nature, but to coexist harmoniously within its limits. The time for incremental adjustments is past. The call now is for transformative action to safeguard our shared planetary home.
Mr. Thorne, Ms. Petrova, thank you both for your exceptionally insightful and eloquent contributions to this vital discussion. You have clearly articulated the core arguments and the inherent complexities surrounding the prioritization of economic growth versus environmental protection. Mr. Thorne emphasized growth as the engine for innovation and poverty reduction, capable of funding environmental solutions, while Ms. Petrova underscored the finite nature of our planet and advocated for a paradigm shift towards sustainability and ecological integrity as the foundation of true prosperity. This debate vividly highlights the complex trade-offs involved and underscores the critical need for ongoing dialogue, innovative thinking, and courageous policymaking. We encourage our audience to reflect deeply on the multifaceted issues raised today. Thank you for joining us on Global